The evening sky was heavy with dark clouds, and the wind carried a cold bite that made people hurry along the streets. Buses came and went, carrying tired workers home after a long day. On the edge of the road, near a lonely bus stop, stood a small boy. He was no more than 7 years old, maybe younger. His little hands clutched the straps of his backpack tightly, and his clothes were damp from the drizzle, from his driver's seat inside the bus. The man saw him. He had been driving the same route for years and had seen all kinds of passengers, office workers, students, shoppers, but a boy alone, this young, at this hour? That was unusual. He slowed the bus and stopped near the boy. The door hissed open. The child didn't move. He just looked at the bus with wide, frightened eyes. His face was pale, and his lips trembled as if he wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. "Are you getting in, son?" the driver asked gently. His voice was calm, the way someone speaks when they don't want to scare a child. The boy didn't answer. He stood frozen for a moment before finally stepping inside. His shoes made small, wet prints on the bus floor. He sat near the front, close to the driver, hugging his backpack as though it was the only safe thing in the world. The driver kept glancing at him in the mirror as the bus moved again. Something felt wrong. A child this young should have been with someone, a parent, a sibling, anyone. But here he was, alone, looking like he hadn't eaten properly in a while. After a few minutes, the driver tried again. "Where's your home, kid? Did you get lost?" The boy shook his head slowly but didn't speak. His eyes stayed on the floor. The driver sighed. He didn't want to push too hard. Sometimes kids stayed quiet because they were scared, not because they didn't know the answers. Passengers got on and off at different stops. A few looked at the boy curiously but didn't say anything. The bus moved through the wet streets, lights from shops and cars reflecting off the puddles. At the next red light, the driver leaned toward the boy. "Hungry?" he asked softly. The boy hesitated, then nodded. The driver's heart sank a little. He reached into his own lunch bag beside the seat and pulled out a small packet of biscuits he had saved for later. He held it out to the boy. The boy looked surprised but took it carefully, as if afraid it might be taken back. He opened the packet slowly and began eating, his small hands trembling a little. "Eat, kid. You need it," the driver said with a faint smile. For the first time, the boy looked up at him. There was still fear in his eyes, but also a tiny spark of trust now. As the bus moved on, the driver made a decision. He couldn't just drop the boy somewhere and leave him. That wouldn't be right. He would finish the route, then take the child to the nearest police station. Someone there could help find his family, but deep inside he felt uneasy. He wondered what had happened. Had the boy run away? Had he been left behind somewhere? Why was no one looking for him? The rain grew heavier outside, tapping against the bus windows. Inside, the boy ate quietly, glancing now and then at the driver as though trying to figure out if this man was truly kind or just another stranger. When the bus stopped at a small roadside shop, the driver quickly stepped out, bought a warm sandwich and a small carton of milk, and handed it to the boy before starting the bus again. The boy stared at the food for a moment, then whispered, "Thank you, sir." It was the first time he had spoken since getting on the bus. The driver nodded, pretending it was nothing. But inside, he felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. What kind of day had this child been through that a simple sandwich and a kind word could mean so much? As they moved along the last few stops, the driver kept thinking about what to do next. He had seen many things in his life, but something about this felt different. He couldn't explain why, but he sensed this night was leading to something bigger, something he couldn't yet see. The boy finished the sandwich slowly, watching the rain streak down the window. His small shoulders looked less tense now, but he still held his backpack tightly, like there was something important inside. The driver didn't ask about it. Not yet. He just focused on the road, waiting for the moment when this journey would take both of them somewhere neither expected. The bus rolled on through the dark streets, the headlights slicing through the rain. The little boy sat quietly behind the driver, his small legs swinging above the floor, the half-empty milk carton still in his hands. He hadn't said a word since his soft thank you, but the way he looked at the driver now was different. There was a hint of trust in those big, tired eyes. The driver kept glancing at him in the mirror. Something about the boy stayed on his mind. Kids got lost sometimes, sure. It happened. But the way this one hugged his backpack, the way he kept glancing out the window like he expected someone to show up any moment, it felt deeper than just being lost. When the bus reached the last stop, the driver turned off the engine. The passengers were all gone now. It was just him and the boy in the dim bus lights, the sound of rain tapping on the roof above them. "All right, kid," the driver said gently, turning around in his seat. "End of the line. We're going to find your folks." The boy looked up, hesitated, then hugged his backpack tighter. The driver softened his voice. "Look, you don't have to be scared. I'm not leaving you alone, okay? We'll get you somewhere safe." The boy gave a small nod but didn't say anything. The driver thought for a moment. He could call the police from here, but he didn't want the boy sitting alone in some cold office while paperwork happened. He decided to take him there himself. At least the kid wouldn't feel abandoned. "Come on," the driver said, standing. He grabbed his umbrella and held out his hand. The boy hesitated before slowly slipping his small hand into the driver's rough, work-worn one. It was a simple thing, but the driver felt the child's trust in that moment, fragile but real. They stepped out into the rain together. The wind was colder now, blowing the rain sideways, but the driver held the umbrella low over the boy as they walked toward the small police station a few streets away. On the way, the driver stopped by a late-night shop. He bought another sandwich and a small packet of cookies for the boy. The kid didn't eat right away this time. He just held the food like he wasn't sure if it was really his dot inside the shop. The warm light made the boy look even smaller. His clothes were damp, his shoes muddy, and his hair stuck to his forehead. People in the shop glanced at them curiously, but the driver didn't care. Back on the street, the boy finally spoke again, his voice so soft it was almost lost in the rain. "Sir, are you taking me to jail?" The driver stopped walking and knelt to meet his eyes. "Hey, no, nothing like that. The police just help find families when kids get lost. They'll call your dad or mom, all right?" The boy's lips trembled. He didn't say anything more, but at least he kept walking. When they reached the station, the driver pushed open the door and guided the boy inside. Warm air greeted them, along with a tired-looking officer at the front desk who raised his eyebrows. In surprise, this little one was alone at the bus stop, the driver explained. "No idea where his family is." The officer nodded, stood, and came around the desk. He crouched down near the boy. "Hey there, son. What's your name?" The boy clutched his backpack tighter. The driver put a hand on his shoulder. "It's okay, kid, you can tell him." After a long pause, the boy whispered his name. It was short and simple, but it carried a weight, like he hadn't said it to anyone in a while. The officer smiled kindly. "All right, we'll find your family, don't worry." The driver stayed with the boy as the officer made some calls. The boy sat beside him on a bench, slowly eating the sandwich now. Outside, the rain beat against the windows. Time passed. The driver kept wondering what kind of home the boy had, what kind of parents would let a child this small end up alone in the rain dot. Then finally, the officer came back. "We've reached someone," he said. "His father is on the way." The driver nodded, relieved. But he didn't expect what would happen next or who the father would turn out to be. The boy sat quietly on the wooden bench inside the small police station, his backpack still clutched close to his chest. He had eaten the sandwich slowly, like each bite was a task rather than a pleasure. The driver stayed near him, arms crossed, leaning against the wall as he waited for someone to come. He didn't know why he was feeling so protective over this child. Maybe it was because of the way the boy kept looking at the door every few minutes, as if someone important was supposed to appear, but never did. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. Rain drummed on the roof above. A couple of officers walked past carrying paperwork, glancing curiously at the boy and the bus driver, but no one interrupted. The driver had already told the story, found him alone at the bus stop, gave him food, brought him here for help. Now all they could do was wait. Finally, one of the officers returned. He had a phone in his hand and a small smile on his face. "We got through to his father," he said. "He's on his way." "Shouldn't be long," the driver nodded. "Good, kid needs to be home." But when he looked at the boy, the child didn't seem relieved. He just hugged his backpack tighter and kept staring at the floor. "You okay, son?" the driver asked. Gently, the boy nodded, but it was a slow, uncertain nod, like he was saying yes only because it was easier than talking. The driver sat down beside him. "Listen, your dad's coming. Everything's gonna be fine." The boy turned his head slightly, eyes wide and serious. "Will he be angry?" he asked in a small voice. That question hit the driver harder than he expected. He cleared his throat. "No, son. Any father would be happy just to see you safe." The boy looked at the floor again. "He's busy, always busy." The driver didn't know what to say to that. He just patted the boy's shoulder lightly. Another 20 minutes passed. The clock kept ticking. The station was quiet except for the sound of the rain and the occasional phone ringing in the background. Then suddenly, headlights flashed outside through the wet glass windows. A black car pulled up, long, sleek, and nothing like the usual cars you saw around this part of town. The door opened, and a man stepped out. He wasn't dressed like someone coming home from work or running errands. He wore a dark tailored coat, the kind that looked expensive even from a distance. Two other men in suits followed behind him, carrying umbrellas. The boy on the bench sat up straighter the moment he saw the car. The driver raised his eyebrows. "That your dad?" he asked. Softly, the boy nodded without speaking. The man in the coat stepped into the station, and even the officers seemed to pause for a moment. There was something about him, the way he walked, the calm confidence in his face, the sharpness in his eyes. He went straight to the boy and knelt down, rain still dripping from his coat. "Son," he said, voice low but full of emotion. "You okay?" The boy nodded again, still quiet. The man pulled him into a hug, holding him tight for several long seconds. You could see the tension leave his shoulders as he realized his child was safe. The driver watched, arms still crossed, feeling both relieved and curious. Finally, the man stood and turned to the driver. "You found him?" he asked. The driver nodded. "He was alone at the bus stop. I couldn't just leave him there." The man stepped closer, extending his hand. "Thank you," he said simply, but his voice carried a weight that made it clear these words came from somewhere deep. Driver shook his hand. Anyone would have done the same. But the man shook his head slightly. "No, most people would have walked away. You didn't." The driver glanced at the car outside, the suits, the expensive coat. Something about this man didn't fit with the small, scared boy on the bench. He finally asked, "You his father?" The man nodded. "Yes, name's Hayes, Richard Hayes." The driver blinked. He knew that name. Everybody did. Hayes was the man behind half the tall buildings in the city, the one who owned companies people read about in newspapers. A billionaire, they called him, but right now he didn't look like one. He just looked like a father who had almost lost something precious. The boy reached for his father's hand. "He helped me," he said softly, pointing to the driver. Richard Hayes looked at the driver again, this time with eyes that carried more than just gratitude. "Sir," he said quietly, You don't know what this means to me." The driver didn't answer. He had no idea yet how much this simple act of kindness was about to change his life. The rain outside slowed to a light drizzle, but the tension in the small police station was thick. The boy stood close to his father now, clutching his hand, as though he never wanted to let go again. The driver watched the two of them silently. He had done his part, found the boy, brought him here, stayed until family arrived. It should have been the end of things, but the father didn't seem ready to leave just yet. He kept glancing at the driver like there was something more he wanted to say. One of the police officers stepped forward, explaining how the boy had been found alone, how the driver had taken care of him until he was safe. The father listened carefully, his hand still resting on his son's shoulder, as if to make sure the boy wouldn't disappear again. When the officer finished, the father turned back to the driver. "I want to thank you properly," he said, his voice calm but carrying a weight that made everyone in the room pay attention. The driver shook his head. "No need for that, sir. Any decent man would have done the same." But the father didn't look convinced. He studied the driver for a long moment before speaking again. Most people these days look the other way. They see a child alone, they assume someone else will handle it. You didn't. The driver didn't know what to say. He wasn't the kind of man who liked attention. He drove his bus, went home, lived a simple life. This night had been different, yes, but he hadn't expected it to matter so much. The boy finally spoke, his voice small but steady. "He gave me food, Dad, and he stayed with me." Something in the father's eyes softened. He crouched beside his son, brushing the boy's damp hair back. "You were brave," he said quietly, "but you scared me half to death." The boy looked down guilty. "I just wanted to find you. You're always so busy." The father froze for a moment at those words. Even the driver felt the sting of them. This wasn't just about a lost child. This was about a father who, for all his wealth and power, was realizing how much time had slipped through his fingers. After a pause, the father stood and faced the driver again. "Will you come with us?" he asked suddenly. The driver frowned. "Come with you? Where?" "I want to talk," the father said simply. "My car is outside. It's late, but I think I owe you more than just a thank you." The driver hesitated. He wasn't sure what to think. He didn't like the idea of stepping into some rich man's world, even for a moment. But then he looked at the boy, who was still holding his father's hand yet kept glancing at the driver, like he didn't want him to leave either. Finally, the driver nodded. "All right, I'll come." They left the police station together. The father's car was waiting, sleek and shining under the streetlight, despite the rain. The driver had never been in a car like that before. It smelled of leather and faint cologne, the kind of luxury he usually only saw from the outside. The boy sat between his father and the driver in the back seat, his small hands still gripping his backpack. He seemed calmer now, like the storm inside him had settled. As the car moved through the city, the father spoke again. "Do you know who I am?" he asked quietly. The driver nodded. "People read the news. They know the name." The father gave a small, humorless smile. "Then you know I have everything a man could want. Money, power, all of it." He paused, his eyes fixed on the dark streets passing by. "But tonight when I couldn't find my son, none of it mattered. Not one bit." The driver didn't answer. He wasn't used to men like this talking so openly. The father looked at him then. "You were there when I wasn't, a stranger, and you kept him safe. I can't ignore that." The driver shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't do it for anything in return." "I know," the father said softly. "That's what makes it matter even more." They drove in silence for a few minutes after that, the sound of the rain on the windows filling the car. The driver had no idea where this night was heading, but something told him this wasn't just going to end with a thank you. The father's tone changed slightly when he finally spoke again. "I want to do something for you," he said, something that lasts. The driver turned to look at him, puzzled. What do you mean? The father didn't answer right away. He just looked out the window, his hand resting on his son's small shoulder, and said, "You'll see." The driver didn't know it yet, but this ride was about to change everything he thought he knew about his own life. The car rolled to a stop in front of a tall building, glowing with lights against the rainy night sky. The driver stared out the window, unsure why they had come here. It didn't look like a home. It looked like the kind of place you only saw on television, the kind of place where important people made important decisions. The father stepped out first, holding the boy's hand. The driver hesitated before following. Inside, the building felt warm, with soft carpets underfoot and walls lined with photographs of big moments, business deals, awards, charity events. People in suits glanced up as the father walked through the lobby, but no one stopped him. It was clear this was his world, and everyone else just moved around it. The father led them into a quiet office on one of the higher floors. It was spacious, but not cold. A soft lamp glowed on the desk. There was a shelf with books, some family pictures, and a large window where the city lights twinkled in the distance. The boy sat on a couch, leaning against his backpack. His eyes were drooping, tired after the long night, but he refused to let go of his father's hand. The father finally turned to the driver. "Please sit," he said. The driver sat awkwardly, his hands folded in his lap. He didn't belong here, not in this polished world with its soft lights and quiet air. But the father's expression wasn't one of power or pride. He looked human, just a man who had almost lost something precious. "I keep thinking," the father began slowly, "about what would have happened if you hadn't stopped that bus tonight. If you had just driven past like everyone else." The driver shook his head. "I couldn't have done that." The boy was alone, scared. He needed someone. "That's the point," the father said softly. "You saw him when the rest of the world didn't." The room went quiet for a moment. The boy had curled up on the couch now, half asleep but still clutching his backpack. The father walked over to his desk, opened a drawer, and took out an envelope. He placed it on the table in front of the driver. "What's this?" the driver asked. "A thank you," the father said simply. "There's money inside, enough to make a difference in your life." The driver looked at the envelope but didn't reach for it. "Sir," he said carefully, "I didn't help your boy for money." The father smiled faintly. "I know. That's why I want you to have it." The driver shook his head. "I've lived my life by one rule: do the right thing because it's right, not because it pays. I can't take this." The father studied him for a moment, then slowly put the envelope back in the drawer. "Then let me do something else," he said. "Something you can't refuse." The driver frowned. "Like what?" The father glanced at his son, asleep on the couch. His expression softened before he turned back to the driver. "You have a job driving buses, right? Long hours, little pay?" The driver nodded. "It's honest work." "Honest," the father agreed, "but too small for a man like you. I have a position open in my company, transportation manager. Better pay, better hours. You'll be home before dark most nights. You'll have time for a family if you want one." The driver blinked in surprise. "Why would you do that for me?" The father's eyes grew serious. "Because tonight you reminded me what matters, not money, not business, people, kindness. I spend my life building companies and chasing numbers. But when I thought I'd lost my boy, none of that mattered. You taught me that without even knowing it." The driver didn't know what to say. Part of him wanted to refuse again, but another part of him, the part that had worked long nights for years, the part that had given up dreams because life was too heavy, felt something stir inside. Maybe this was a chance for more than just survival. Finally, he nodded slowly. "All right," he said. "I'll take the job." The father extended his hand, and the driver shook it firmly. Before leaving, the father gently lifted his sleeping son into his arms. The boy stirred for a moment, blinking drowsily at the driver. "You're coming back, right?" he murmured sleepily. The driver smiled faintly. "Yeah, kid, I'll see you again." They left the building together, stepping out into the cool night. The rain had stopped now, and the city lights reflected off the wet streets. The driver walked home not with money in his pocket, but with something far better, a chance at a new life, given to him because one night he had stopped his bus for a scared little boy in the rain.